well, I've changed. So who am I to like think that these other people in my life haven't changed? It's been 10 years or 5 years, or like we're always moving and evolving, whether we're like really, in doing a lot of work on ourselves or not, you're still going to change and evolve in some way, shape, or form. And to not give people credit for that,
Hmm.
or, even to be open to that possibility is silly. And I mean, I've definitely been there. So I say that with definitely having been in that space of like knowing I had changed, but not thinking others had changed.
Oh,
Unleash the untapped potential within you as we dive fearlessly into the realms of healing, personal growth, self-love, and uncharted territories of the human experience. Join us as we navigate relationships, conquer career and business milestones, and explore the depths of spirituality. This isn't just a podcast, it's a manifesto for the resilient, the ambitious, the soul-searching women and men of today. Grab your coffee and let's dive in with Beyond the Surface.
welcome back to another episode here on Beyond the Surface. And today I am joined by Jamie, and I am so honored and grateful to be in conversation with you today, Jamie. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Well, I'm so excited to dive into some aspects in your journey with healing, and I know as well you have a podcast, but I'd love for you to take a moment to introduce yourself, share a little bit to those that are tuning in and listening, a little bit more as to who Jamie is.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I'm Jamie, and gosh, I have, yeah, just been on this incredible journey of healing, and it's been a roller coaster for sure. And in the last, well, this year, I've kind of finally gotten to a place where I am starting to give back, starting to find my
Mm,
path in how I am meant to show up and now offer and serve and help others in the same way that I was helped. And I think it's
yeah.
so important to give back. So and share, our experiences and our stories. And so that's where I'm at in my journey now, is getting to that place.
Beautiful. I think there's something to say when we really just give ourselves the space and the time to simply do. I don't want to say like the work or do the healing, or because I feel like that's always ongoing, but what we need in that space,
Mm-hmm.
and giving ourselves the time and space for what we need to move through in order to then become on the other side. And what beautiful thing is it for us to be of service to other people. And I feel like that's just what I've always said, like that's just what makes life go round, is like it
Mm-hmm.
just feels so good to whatever that looks like and however that looks like. I recently had a conversation with someone here on the show, and she said something about how like our all of our purpose is love. Like all of our purpose is love, and how we distribute that love is in the ways that we, whether it's a podcast or the different offerings and things that we create. And I was like, wow, what a beautiful description of what that looks like and what that's meant to be. But ultimately, it always comes back and is rooted in love. But I
Yeah,
just
I
keep thinking about
agree.
that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I love it. Right?
Yeah. And I was just thinking, just as you said about like in the healing journey, and we're always healing, but sometimes we need to have that like pause or that space that's just for us before we get to a place of being able to
Mm,
serve. As you were talking about the love, I was like, well, yeah, we need the space to learn to love ourselves first, so
mm.
then we can then share that love with other people.
Yeah. Yeah. 1,000,000%. One
Yeah.
million percent. I'd love for you to kind of dive in with your experience and your journey. And, you share that part of your healing journey was really separating and creating that separation from your family. And I'm curious, to dive into, if you want to share a little bit of like what that was, what that healing journey was like, what was it that you were kind of working on, and what was this like call, like what made you want to create that separation in order for you to feel like you had that place and space for your own healing.
Yeah, for sure. Wow, I feel like that's like a big um, question to tackle, but diving in. Um, yeah, so I didn't really know that I needed that separation,
Mm,
and it kind of came from a place of like I'm going to say like I really began my like I always kind of say my more intensive healing journey in 2019 when I got sober. And that was a
mm,
turning point of just like finally getting to that place of being like something has to change. Like something has to change. I had been
mm,
trying and trying and felt like I would get one foot up and then just kind of get kicked back down. And so the turning point really came in 2019 after the biggest change I made was like, no, I'm done drinking. I'm not touching this stuff anymore. I didn't know how or what my journey ahead was going to look like or how I was going to change my life beyond that or feel better or any of that. But that one decision just kind of put in motion this journey that I've now been on. And that was kind of the starting point. And so with that, at the time I was living actually in my parents' basement with my partner at the time. It was just kind of hard times and we were where we were. And that was really unhealthy for me. Being in the community that I grew up in was really unhealthy for me. I grew up
mm,
like I was homeschooled and grew up in very strict religion, and so there was a lot of like being very very sheltered, and my world was really really small. I felt like my world only existed growing up in that community and
mm,
going to church, and so I felt like I was still very much trapped there. And in 2020, um you know coming on the end of 2020, and I had begun this journey of starting to find healing and different groups and exploring plant medicine and ceremony and different things like this. And by the end of 2020, um, I left my partner. I came home from a weekend away where I'd been to like this ceremony, and I honestly didn't know that I was going to leave my partner. I knew there was a lot of
yeah.
problems, but it was like I just got to this point where my internal world had shifted so much, but my physical world hadn't. And I just got to this
Mm,
other breaking point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't be in these like just negative spaces and not moving forward. And so in October of 2020, um, I left my partner, and with that, I also left my community where I lived. I left my home,
mm.
and once again had no idea where I was going or what I was doing. Like I literally just packed a bag, and like my one of my friends was like, "You can come here tonight," and I was like, "Perfect." And just kind of like took that leap. And so with that, um at the same time, I think it was like within days after leaving, I realized that I needed this separation from my mother, because that relationship had been very codependent and
Mm,
very there just wasn't I felt like I was constantly just like hitting this brick wall with her of like trying to set up my boundaries, but just never being respected. And I didn't know what else to do. So I got to this point of just like, I just really needed to just shut everything out, everyone out who had kind of been attached to my past, and really, really needed to just like sink into me and what I needed and where I was
Mm.
going moving forward. So, and really needed to give myself that space to be like, I need to, like, I really need to just kind of purge from my past, really, and figure out who I am, because I can't hear that. I can't see that. It's clouded by
Mm.
everything that I've been stuck in. So yeah, so I think it was within days of leaving, I got on the phone with my mother, and it was a conversation that I was very much avoiding, but I knew I needed to have it. And I got on the phone with her and told her I couldn't speak to her anymore.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And how does she respond to that?
I mean, obviously she was hurt, and she was crying on the phone, and but she, was able to at least say in that moment, like, I understand that you need to do whatever you need to do for yourself. And
Oh,
so, and then we did not speak for 3 years.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm so amazed that even though like there was still a little bit of her being able to have some like there's some sort of understanding there and
Mhm.
probably that supported you in some kind of way, shape, or form. Maybe it's not something that you maybe would have known in the moment, but I feel
Mhm.
like, being able to receive that probably felt so good. And what was
Mhm.
it like then, coming back together, if that has happened?
It has, yeah. I really want to share this really quickly too, because when we came back together, so
Sure.
we just reconnected this past November. Um, and in that reconnection, I actually found out. So within the time frame that me and my mother weren't speaking, I actually became really close to
Mhm.
her mother, so my Mamie. And me and my Mamie would have phone conversations all the time, and um she was very involved in the recovery community here, and so it was really nice to be able to have
Mm.
someone in my life. I haven't had a whole lot of, like, support or adults kind of as guides, throughout my life. And so it was really nice to find this connection with my grandmother, because I lost my other grandmother when I was 10, and that was really, really difficult. Um, so I with taking that separation from my mother, I really reconnected with my grandmother, and I really needed that. I was going through a divorce. You know, there was just so much going on. I was purging and going through
Yeah.
all this childhood stuff. And so it was really nice to have someone to talk to. And I actually found out when me and my mother reconnected that when I called my mother and told her I couldn't speak to her anymore, she was at her mom's. And so she had no choice but to kind of tell her mother what was going on. And so it was almost like
Mhm.
this forced healing on everybody that kind of happened, because she then had to open up to her mother and tell her what was going on. And it was just had this like really cool ripple effect, in a way,
Wow.
which I thought was really neat when I found that out. And the way that the way that me and my mother got back, like, kind of found our way back to each other, because I'm very stubborn, and I will admit that, and very resistant sometimes to things that I know I have to do.
Mm.
And I knew I had to talk to my mother and needed to find, I didn't know what outcome I was looking for, or even, I just knew there had to be some kind of peace,
Yeah.
because I had a lot of anger, and I had a lot of, well, mostly anger. Um, and so, my grandmother passed away suddenly in September of, well,
Oh.
it's been a year. It's been a little over a year.
Mhm.
So she passed away really suddenly and unexpectedly, and I think it was kind of her passing that kind of slowly started to put these little, like, you need to reconnect with your mother, because obviously I went to the funeral and I went to the wake and my mother was there, and we kind of started communicating here and there, just tiny little pieces. And then in November, this past November, I just wrote her this email, and I had no idea what I was going to write. But it was the first time that I wrote from a place of like not anger, not
Mm,
you need to believe what I believe, because I really struggle with the religious aspect and the beliefs, because I have such different beliefs
mm,
and I'm very strong in my beliefs. And so I have really struggled with that because I've seen how certain beliefs are very harmful to other people. So
yeah.
that's been kind of the biggest struggle, I think, for me with getting to that place with my mom. And so I wrote this really big email. I don't even really know what it said, but it was basically just me laying out, like, this is who I am now. This is what I believe.
Mm,
This is what I have learned and seen that happened in our childhood that was wrong and it wasn't okay. Even the things that I've seen, how you were treated, mom, that was wrong. That wasn't okay. And I broke down like my understanding of why she did the things she did, and I was able to really just come from this place of now being an adult who has gone through her
mm,
own healing and has been able to see how other people were in pain, and how by my parents not dealing with their trauma and their, things that they needed to deal with, how it made them act in the ways that they acted, and made them show up in the ways that they showed up, even though they did better than their parents, right?
mhm.
um and so I just
Yeah.
was able to break this all down in this email, and I sent it. And I swear I don't know if she was like sitting right next to her email, but I got like a text message from her like almost instantly. Um
Wow.
and she wanted to call me. She was like, read your email. Can I call you? And I was like, no, I'm not ready for that.
Mhm.
And so I was like, because she was like, you're really good at writing. I'm not so good at writing. Like, I'd love to be able to call you and talk to you. And I was like, no, just try writing, because I I think that's one thing. Like, I just it was nice to be in this space of like really sticking with my own boundaries and being like, no, it doesn't
Mm,
feel okay for me to talk to you on the phone yet. I need space. Like, I feel like, and so we're just kind of like learning how to be in this new relationship together. Um
mm,
where it doesn't necessarily even have to be mother and daughter. It can just be two humans who are reconnecting and learning about each other. And it's nice because we're at this place of, I'm not scared to hurt your feelings by setting my boundaries. And like, even when we're
mm.
on the phone sometimes, because my mother and I are very similar in a lot of ways too, which, always leads to clashing a little bit. But um I'll be on the phone and I only have a certain amount of energy in my bucket. And, she'll be going on and on about something that I really am not, I don't care about. And not to sound mean, but it's just like, I don't have the energy. I love that you're excited about it, but I don't have that energy. And so now I'm at a place of being like, okay, I gotta go. I'm out of energy. I'll talk to you later. Instead of,
Mm,
trying to show up as that person who's like being nice, and just like, that depletes you. It makes you angry. It makes you bitter. It, like, when you're not putting yourself first and your own needs first, that is where all these, a lot of these issues come in with relationships, because you're constantly putting someone else ahead of your own needs, and then you get resentful.
100%. Oh my gosh, 1,000,000%. It's
Yeah.
and that's where like I've always kind of said I've always had this look on relationships, and not just like romantic relationships, but I think I'm now starting to see it in just the other areas of my life, but just how it's so important to come like full on your own in a sense that, and I dance with this because I've seen different perspectives on this idea where it's like, yes, there are going to be times where I might not be my 100%, and is it okay that we look to those people in our circle for that support in those
Mhm.
moments? And I think yes, 100%. And so I think what it really is, at least for me and my angle when I look at relationships, is simply like I'm whole majority of the time, like on my own, and I'm not looking for this relationship or for you specifically to fulfill something. I'm not
Mhm.
like needing something from you, because I think that's where it leads to these certain type of expectations that ultimately end up leading us disappointed. And so like I love the way that you've navigated this, and also how you really put everything in an email. I mean, it's so interesting. I did the same thing with my own dad, and it was, when I first wrote a letter to him, it was not very nice because it needed to come out that way,
Mhm.
like you, like I had so much anger, and it just needed to be out, and it needed to be what it was for him to really, I feel like, really understand the angle that I was coming from. But it was so healing to release all of that, like all the anger, and release it and put it into this like letter. It's, and to also be able to send it. I know a lot of people are kind of like, write the letter
Yeah.
or whatever, but don't send it. And I'm like, if you can find that courage and that strength in you to send it off,
Mhm.
it is so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Mm, I love it. That's what a beautiful thing that you've experienced. With the other thing that I was thinking about with what you said about you and your mom is like, it's not necessarily has to be a mother daughter relationship, it's two human beings. And I think that's the thing about parenthood, is kind of, I'll put it at that, is like this almost sense of like ownership. I feel like, we've been taught almost, it's like you respect your parents, and you kind of probably we're told never to say no to our parents and
Mhm.
whatnot, but they are equal human beings. That's what this is. And when we can dismantle that, those labels around like, you're my father, you're my
Mhm.
mother, yes, there's still like this gratitude, of course, because we wouldn't be here without them. But when you can remove those labels, then you see them as humans, and you
Yeah.
see them as humans that also are going to make mistakes, and they're also
Yeah.
going to do the best that we can, and we get to learn from them, and we also get to teach them too, right? Like teach them how to be in relationship with us, teach us. And the piece around that is communication.
Yeah.
We can't have any of that without communicating what we need. Recently I had a couple of years ago, my dad, on my birthday, he didn't pick up the phone and called me, and like kind of wrote a Facebook post. And I was like, you had 2 minutes to do that and not pick up the phone and call me. And I was upset, and I was like, wow, like, but it gave me this opportunity a few months later to have this conversation with him and simply say, please don't do that. Like, if you don't have the time to pick up the phone and call me, like, I'd rather you just not go and post anything. And it was just this moment for him to be like, ah, okay. And also see how every relationship that he has with each one of his kids are going to be vastly different.
Yeah.
And I also had compassion for him in that moment too, because it's like he was not around for so many years. And so he's also relearning, and he also has to navigate the different relationships and expectations that we all have for each other. So it's just this like dance we do with not just our parents, but like the people in our lives and relationships.
Absolutely. And I think there's so much like societal pressure around family in general, and societal expectations of what that's
Mhm.
supposed to look like, and you know, that family loyalty that is just supposed to be there no matter what. And like I experienced a lot of that in my time where I wasn't speaking to my family. And I didn't speak to my brother for like the same amount of time. My sister, I was still around, but not as much. And there's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of like, what do you mean you don't talk to your mother, and what do you mean you don't talk to your brother? And it's like, once again, it's like this, it, yes, they're your family, but it is just human to human relationship, right? And sometimes you have to learn
Mhm.
how to, especially when you're changing so much, you have to learn how to show up in those relationships again as yourself and without
Yeah.
expectation from the other person. And it's like I'm doing them a disservice if I'm not showing up as my
Mm.
best self that I'm able to show up as. Um,
Yeah.
I'm not doing them any favors. So, but yeah, I think
Yeah.
there's so much pressure around family expectations, and that, those relationships should just be no matter what, right?
Yeah.
Or that they should look a certain way. And it's like we can
Mhm.
define how those look. Like I never stopped loving my family, right?
Mm.
It's like that's the difference.
Yeah.
It's like I don't hate them. I'm looking out for me right now so that I can then show up better in these relationships. And you know, I can't even begin to explain how different it's been go kind of reconnecting with my whole family again. Like it's been so different because I'm showing up not afraid to be myself. I'm more
Mm.
relaxed. I'm more like, yeah, I don't agree with that, or I do agree with that, or I'm not scared to be me and to share the things that I've learned, and I'm noticing how differently they're showing up.
That's so interesting too. How,
Yeah.
like when it just naturally happens that, we get to, yeah, like it has this ripple effect even without us knowing and
Mhm.
without us like doing anything. It automatically has a ripple effect. And one thing that I'm curious to see how you navigate, or if you have like insight to share, but this piece around you showing up fully yourself now, being able to show up fully yourself in your relationships when you're surrounded by your family. And you also said, and not having expectations from them. So,
Mhm.
how have you navigated that? Or, yeah, how have you navigated that?
The expectation piece.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, um, I think by realizing that, well, once again, it comes back to those, like, to my own programming of
Mm.
what I've been brought up and told that a family should do, right? And realizing, or how a family should be. And so, like, there's been years where I've just been so disappointed by my family not showing up for me, and, just, yeah, just being disappointed by my own expectations based on what I have been told a family should be and look like. And so I think
Mm.
for me, the piece of being able to come from a place of no longer having those expectations is realizing that anything I need, I can find, and it might not be
Mm.
within my family. A lot of my emotional
Mm.
support and, you know, a lot of the things I need for my own self, I don't get from my family. I get it from my community because they are
Mm.
more on a vibrational match for me for what I need. And so I
Yeah.
think it's that piece of just realizing that, like, yeah, you don't, any whatever you need, you can find, and it doesn't have to be within your family.
Hmm. And it doesn't have to all be with one person, too.
No,
I
exactly.
think that's
Yeah.
also that's such a big piece when you're in, a relationship, whether you're married or whatever
Mhm.
that looks like, right? Like that pressure sometimes that we put on one individual person to fulfill all aspects of who we
Mhm.
are. I don't know why this is coming up, but this feels so like childhood, but when we have a best friend, it's like
Mhm.
at one point we're like, you only can have one best friend.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and it just, I don't know why this is coming up, but it's just such a bizarre thing because
Yeah.
you have such different relationships with so many different people. And so you can have 50 best friends if you want to,
Yeah.
because like you said, like they're all going to fulfill a different piece of us.
100%.
and yeah, it just looks so different, you know, these types of conversations. Like I feel like I start to have them with certain people in my family and not necessarily all of them, but I have other people for that too. When I want to dive into something like this where we're kind of
Yeah.
unpacking something, you know, I get to have that conversation with other people, and there isn't that expectation that I have to do that with my family too.
Yeah.
In that in that too though, I'm like, the piece around you being like, how can you still be your fully expressed self where these types of conversations like bring you so much joy and they probably naturally want to come out, and it's just not received. And that's the reason that I asked this too is like, you know, I know you mentioned plant medicine too. Like plant medicine has become such a big piece of my life, specifically like working with cacao. And there's been not necessarily shame, but just this like weird resistance to be fully that person where I'm like, I'm Ashley, I'm spiritual. I'm a spiritual
Hmm.
human being, and letting people see me that way, and also being everything that I've always been too. The silly and goofy and that person too. And also the girl who yeah, sometimes gets a little angry and is triggered. Like I'm all of these things. And
Hmm.
so how do we get to be all of these things? I'm curious if you have like perspective on that.
On like how to be all of those things in
Yeah.
situations where you don't really feel. Um, I mean, I feel like I'm still very much learning this, like,
Mm,
and I don't know. I feel like learning to show up as like fully yourself is an ongoing journey too, because you're always changing.
that's
Um,
true.
I think for me, kind of what I do is I'm no longer, well, once again, it kind of comes back to that aspect of like not needing them to fulfill everything, you know,
Mm,
but being open to just, if things do come up, I'm not going to like shut myself down and not say like, "Oh, I do plant medicine," or you know what I mean? Like whatever kind of conversation
mm,
comes up, I'm not going to continue to kind of reject aspects of myself or hide aspects of myself because they're not necessarily welcome in that
mm, mm,
situation. I'm not going to avoid them.
mm.
And I think that's kind of where the difference comes in because I used to do that. I wouldn't talk about anything that I
Yeah.
was doing or the other, aspects of myself. Um and yeah, I mean, I think it's also just not having to, like, not having to be in that situation and be like, this is what I do and this is who I am, and like trying to shove that in
Yeah.
their faces. It's like we are so vast in who we are that I can show up fully. And I think for me, it's like showing up energetically too. It's like I'm showing
Mm,
up more energetically open in a way, for lack of a better way to put it, of like, this is my energy. This is who I am. I'm happy with who I am. I'm happy on the path that I'm on. And I think that shines through without having to have the conversations, right? And if they come up, well, then you can jump into that. But,
mm,
like, it was funny because even in the last few months, I think it was my sister made a comment to my mother at one point when I first reconnected about how nice it was to kind of have me back and to see me being myself again. And I thought that
mm.
was really, it was just really nice to hear that, like, she felt that too. It was like, it's so nice Jamie's, relaxed and she's cracking jokes, and so it comes through without necessarily
Yeah.
having to be like, this is who I am and this is what I do, and oh, that makes you uncomfortable, well, whatever. Like, I'm gonna talk about it anyway, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna, all these things. I mean, and that's the thing too, it's like I no longer hide any aspects of myself. Like, for a long time I wouldn't dare tell my mother that I'd done plant medicine, and now I'm like, no,
Mhm.
if that conversation comes up, that is my experience. I'm going to talk about that because that's helped me. be like so
Yeah.
dramatically. Um, so yeah, I think it's just no longer
Mhm.
hiding, but
Yeah.
also not having to like
Yeah.
throw it in their face.
Exactly, exactly. That hiding part, I think, is exactly what feels like it's hitting home. And this openness too, right? I think it's openness of a couple things, right? Like there's the piece around the energetic, like you've mentioned that you come in more relaxed, and that I think speaks so much for itself because you know I I can see the difference where I'm walking into an environment where I am so much more relaxed, and then you walk into an environment where you're feeling tense and
Hmm.
you're kind of like on guard in a sense. And that's where like these almost like these comments or the way you react in situations is so different when you
Hmm.
are coming with a guard versus
Hmm.
when you're coming just chill and relaxed.
Yeah.
And there is a piece around openness too, where it's like openness to be fully ourselves, and openness to be surprised as well by the people in our lives. I feel like that
Absolutely.
piece is important to have, right? Because we never know that something that we say they might be actually more open to hearing and receiving than we actually think. Sometimes we think people are so set in their ways, but sometimes it's our delivery that was not being received one point or another. And now it's being received because, like you said, we're coming from this like relaxed place, and we're not like in defense mode.
Hmm. I think we also don't
Yeah.
often give credit to, yeah, like on the same line as that. It's like we don't often think about the fact that we've changed, which means other people have changed too. Even if we don't
Yeah.
see it, I just had this conversation with a friend like just a few days ago, and we've had this conversation a few times where like it's like, well, I've changed, so who am I to like think that these other people in my life haven't changed? It's been 10 years or 5 years, or like we're always moving and evolving, whether we're like really, in doing a lot of work on ourselves or not. You're still going to change and evolve in some way, shape, or form. And to not give people credit for that,
Hmm.
or even to be open to that possibility, is silly. And I mean, I've definitely been there, so I say that with definitely having been in that space of like knowing I had changed but not thinking
um
others had changed.
oh, 100%. I think I'm
Yeah.
still in that space of like that understand, like really like absorbing that. But I think it also comes with like we're so, just that naturally as humans. This book that I read a long time ago, The Four Agreements, like those like four principles just like stay in my mind at the forefront. And one of those things is like, we really do think that everything is about us, but it's really not. Like not everything's about us, but it
Yeah.
comes into that piece around, we think, yeah, we're the ones changing. It's like we're forgetting everybody else around us is too.
Yeah.
And there's this piece around giving people permission to change and accepting them for who they are changing and becoming.
Hmm.
And also like that, I had this conversation yesterday with one of my like dear friends and mentors, and she was just reminding me of how our words, I know this sounds so wild, but like our words create prophecies. And so
Mm.
when you are putting something out into the world and you say, well, that person is never going to change, that's creating a whole entire prophecy around that. And even if they are changing, probably because you are seeing that and that's what you're putting out, you are never going to see that person change.
Hmm.
And so it's just reminding ourselves to be paying more attention to what we say and what we're putting out there, and reminding ourselves like, that we can be open to this possibility of this person changing and staying open to that. And that involves, our family and everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I
Hmm.
think too, it's like we can be open to that change. And I think when it comes to specifically people who have hurt us, right? It's like, or that
Yeah.
we've been hurt by, I think sometimes we think that, oh, just because they've changed, I now have to let them back in my life, or like all of these things that we make
Mm,
up in our mind too, right? And it's like, no, you can witness their change and growth and find forgiveness and compassion and love and all of these things for yourself and for them, and still, and you can reconnect, but you can create a new path forward. You're never going to go back to the way things were, because you have more awareness now too, and you get to decide what boundaries are in place, right, for your own
yeah.
self. And I think we often, and I think that comes from a place of fear, right, of like when there's
Mhm.
been hurt and whatnot. um yeah, I think that's a
Yeah.
big aspect.
Very true. Very true. And sometimes we're like clinging to the idea, like what once was in that
Mm-hmm.
relationship. Even though there's like hurt and pain, at some point, there was, people who had such a big role in our lives. And sometimes we're clinging on to that. And that's what we're holding on to. But like you said, like that no longer is there. And sometimes you won't get back to that place fully 100%,
Mm-hmm.
and that is okay. And like you said too, it's you can have love and forgiveness and simply part ways and also
Yeah.
never speak again and have that
Yeah.
moment of beautiful, you transform or you kind of heal or whatever that looks like, and you can also part ways and be okay, and
Yeah.
that's it.
100%.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I love it. So, oh, this conversation has been so fun. I mean, it's so interesting to dive
Yeah.
into like dynamics around like relationships and whatnot. But if you were to
Absolutely.
kind of like distill your life's journey and wisdom into like a single piece of advice for those that are listening, what would that be?
Oh, wow. That's a lot of pressure. um Gosh, I would say give yourself space. Give yourself time. I think that's one of
Mm,
the biggest things I learned throughout my journey in the last couple of years, is really honoring the time that you need to figure yourself out, to grieve, whatever it is you're going through. You don't have to figure it out right away. You don't have to, like, if there are these relationships that are, having their bumps, it's like it's okay. Give yourself the time you need to
mm-hmm.
whatever that looks like.
Much. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much for this beautiful conversation, sharing your journey and your learnings as you kind of come right on the outside of it. And what's beautiful is like even a year from now, it's like the understanding and the perspective on your journey is gonna shift and grow and evolve even more. So I
Absolutely.
love that I'm kind of like capturing you right now in this moment, and to see like a year from now
Yeah.
what that looks like and what the conversation would look like. But I'd love for you to share, if there's anything that you want to share, if you want to share more about your podcast, just where people can find you. And we'll, of course, leave it in the show notes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I have a podcast. It's called A Connected Life, and it's it's evolving a little bit right now too. So I think like I have kind of like one season out, and I think I'm going to take a little bit of a pause and just kind of like readjust some things. But you can find me there, and you can also find me on Instagram at iam.jamiemarie. And I also have a Substack site where I am starting to kind of share my journey and build a community. And yeah, so that's where you can find me. My Substack site is called A Connected Life as well. And yeah, that's where I'm at.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And also just again, thank you so much for this incredibly beautiful conversation and sharing your journey and your experiences. I so appreciate you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to leave a review and continue the conversation with me over on social media. And we'll see you in the next episode.